It's great to be here. My name's Gus. I'm from Basecamp Research. We're a biotechnology or tech bio startup based here in London. I'm the platform engineering lead at Basecamp Research. They're responsible for all of our infrastructure, but I also work a lot with our data pipelines, AI research teams, our genomics teams, our structural biology teams, etc. And we really work very closely with those teams to enable all of the work that they do. And really, Basecamp is founded on this core thesis or a recognition that every product sold today by biotech companies originates from nature. This is anything from medicines, so insulin, PCR tests, aspirin, antibiotics are all originally sourced from nature. Consumer products, agriculture, industry, especially biocatalysis for various different workloads, from the laundry detergent that you have in your washing machines. Various types of those will use proteins which are biologically sourced and then engineered to work. And this really all comes from life on Earth. And this is very interesting because so little of the life on Earth has actually been studied. And this is an estimate from some research that we've seen. And if you were to extrapolate this into maybe something that is able to be understood a little bit more intuitively, if you were to take all of the water that's in the Pacific Ocean, this would amount to about 5 drops worth. So really, we have such a fundamentally, incredibly limited understanding of the life on Earth. And this has already resulted in so many different breakthroughs in all of these different domains. We recognize this as a huge opportunity for expanding what we know and being able to exploit that essentially for the good of humanity. And I've got a brief little video here that talks through how we've built a global data supply chain across 28 different countries, where we have essentially sampled on an extremely massive scale in an unbiased way, capturing not only different organisms and sequence diversity, so genetic sequence diversity, but also the ways those organisms interact with each other in the environment. This has expanded the known tree of life significantly, especially in the microbial spaces. We've discovered an estimated over 1 million new species, along with 12 billion different novel proteins as well. We call this base data. And while this is a very exciting resource alone, it becomes even more powerful and more impactful when you combine it with AI and use it as a training data source for the next generation of biological foundation models. And this is what exactly, and really our ultimate goal here is to build an AI, and this is very much like an end goal, an end state, but is to build a model or a set of models or a tool where you can go from prompt to cure. And really, ideally, and this is our co-founder here, you put in some kind of, I would like a gene editing system that can modify T cells, blah, 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 to target these different indications, and we can then have a model that can go off and generate the right editing system to do this. And we've made a lot of steps towards this, recently releasing our Eden Foundation models earlier this year, which was a collaboration between the research teams at NVIDIA, ourselves, University of Pennsylvania, and some very big names in the field as well, across Microsoft Research, and a few other institutions that I'm not going to bother to go through here. But really, we've shown that not only does this work in computer and simulations, but we've actually expressed these proteins in the lab, ran assays and tested them in human T cells, and shown a level of programmability in gene editing applications and in antibiotic applications, all of them working in the lab. And this has been really exciting. It's the validation that we've also gotten from the press on this, in particular some of the more recent ones about the Eden models themselves. And we've worked very closely with a lot of partners, and we're really excited to scale this up and drive it forwards even more into the future. And a key part of us achieving these objectives and then working towards them further into the future is really trying to align what we want to do scientifically with what we need to do on the infrastructure side to make this happen. As you can imagine, a massive scale sequence database, large scale AI research, not only requires a large amount of GPU compute, so frontier GPU performance here, where we're actually experimenting with these different AI models, but it also requires massive amounts of storage, which we can access to do all of the data processing and prep that we need to do beforehand. We're collecting raw sequencing reads data, which is petabytes and petabytes of data. And then we're analyzing that and extracting novel proteins out of it, novel genomes, different protein functional groups out of that, and then using this as our training data source. That's what we call base data, to feed into those AI models. And then on top of all of this, we need to make sure that there's as little friction as possible between all of these different elements and compressing the time taken to insight, so to speak. How quickly can we go from having this data asset, from having these AI models, how can we close that loop and then test it in the lab ultimately and iterate on that as quickly as we can? And that's key to achieving these goals, and it's been a key part of how we progressed with the EDA model and achieved it in as short a time frame as we did. I think when we were originally faced with this objective to scale up our data significantly and to scale up our ambition significantly, we took a sort of hard look at where we were today, or I say today, this is more like 18 months ago, where we were 18 months ago in regards to compute, in regards to how much we spent, how much friction there was for our researchers and our different users, and how realistically how scalable was our solution at the time. We noticed we were operating across 5+ different cloud platforms, which sounds ridiculous, but I'm sure if you talk to any startup, they'd probably say something similar. There's lots of different incentives on that front as well. And we started doing a lot of our research in a GPU availability crisis as well. If you remember early 2024, I believe, it was very, very difficult to get your hands on any kind of GPU for any kind of research. So we were scattered across, SageMaker here, Zero here, or something like this here. And that creates a lot of friction when you're trying to work with large data sets, when you're trying to port different kinds of model code across different places, when you're trying to implement different analysis pipelines and different infrastructures. This can become a real challenge. We're limited in availability of CPU cores and GPUs particularly, working with spot instances, working with incorrectly sized instances, poorly optimized pipelines. This resulted in very long feedback cycles, especially on our data processing and our experiments, because we're often getting caught up in a lot of operational overhead. And realistically, the infrastructure that had sort of organically grown in our company had started to constrain what we actually wanted to achieve. And in particular, sort of the core objectives that we distilled down to, what we were actually trying to achieve with our infrastructure was these kind of 3 verticals. We needed to scale our database massively, where we were seeing scaling laws making a big difference to our AI models. We were seeing more data was resulting in better models for our use case. And we needed to scale this up more to get a better understanding of the different organisms that are available, all of their different capabilities and different functions, and a better understanding that tracks downstream in literally every metric. When we were training our foundation model, we were able to see as tokens went up, performance went up pretty much across the board. Up to 10 trillion tokens is what we ended up training our foundation model on. And this was a result of scaling our database 10x. So the performance would be nowhere near what it is today if we didn't do this scaling exercise. In order to achieve this, and we did this in about 3 months or 4 months or something like that, we need to massively increase the speed which we were able to process data through our pipelines. And these are fairly complex bioinformatic hybrid CPU and GPU workloads that can do this processing. Obviously, if we're working on AI models, we need to also accelerate our AI research efforts as well, make sure we can run many experiments in parallel, all using this data to understand best model architectures, parameter sizing, evaluations, inference, etc. And this resulted in a solution. We did a lot of evaluation of different cloud providers, on-premise providers, cost modeling, performance modeling, trials, and proof of concepts. And ultimately, we ended up landing on a high-performance on-premise hybrid CPU and GPU cluster. We were able to co-design the storage, networking, along with the pipelines that we're actually running this on to really optimize completely down the stack for what we needed. And this is particularly good for our use case because we do a lot of very large batch workloads. We're not responsive to customer demands or anything like that. We're running very, very large pipelines 24/7 at a very high duty cycle and need a lot of storage, a lot of compute, and a lot of GPU. It was good for us to maintain full operational control and resilience. This is particularly important as we'd kind of just come off the back of a supply crisis where we were struggling to get enough pack capacity to actually do what we needed to do. So it makes us feel very comfortable that we know that a certain level of our operations are always going to be available to us regardless of what a cloud provider might be willing to give us on demand or not have available for us as well. And another key part here was also trying to reduce the cost per unit of compute. Can we reduce how much it costs for us to process a single sample? Can we reduce how much it costs for us to do an experiment? And I think I've got a nice picture here of what we sort of ended up landing with for this first iteration. I think we want to scale, beyond this. It looks really pretty as well, which is quite nice. Testament to bulk there on a very nice data hall. But ultimately, if my clicker works, there you go. This was all powered by our partner ecosystem that we ended up working with. Obviously, NVIDIA, Bulk, VAST, and Boston. I'm sure we're all familiar with which roles each of them play. But very much has been absolutely critical for making this work for us. And in the end, has been a solution which we were able to rely on and able to deliver a lot of very cutting edge frontier research with as well. And I think sort of going off the back of what Boston was talking about earlier, the impact so far, like what does it actually matter for the business building this infrastructure? Because it doesn't really matter what you build on infrastructure level. It's not actually impacting what you need to achieve for your company or like what are your business goals? And we saw step change gains in our pipeline performance, at least 10x, and many workloads simply shifting from the cloud to this optimized stack. We saw 5x on just a single tool, and that's a combination of networking, storage, higher CPU, IPC, etc. And then across the board, we're able to right-size this much more efficiently. We were able to unify our data and compute layer into one space, which meant that the friction between moving between different environments was basically eliminated. The time taken that you need to copy large data sets, and I'm talking tens of terabytes of data sets between different locations, is eliminated. Everything is accessible to everyone all the time, instantly. It's infrastructure that we've built so that we can scale out even further. And this is very much one of our ambitions. We want to keep scaling our data, we want to keep scaling our models, and we want to keep scaling the amount of intelligence that we're able to address for the particular solutions that we're looking for. And from an operations perspective, I think something that's talked about a lot is like the operational overhead of managing your own infrastructure, managing your own estate. This is something that we've found to be resilient, scalable, and very streamlined, and not something that we necessarily would have expected coming from more of a cloud. This was something that we saw as a risk that has ended up being not necessarily a big problem for us. I've got a little brief video here, kind of bringing us back then to that other higher level of ultimately going from prompting on a disease to generating a medicine. Once again, this is like a long-term ultimate goal, but this infrastructure was a key part of enabling the first step of many towards that very long-term objective of like 10, 20 years, where we can actually end up prompting on a particular genetic disease and getting a cure for that in the end. Thank you, everyone.